Hello?
Hi there, we're just about to get started.
Okay.
All right, I'm sure we'll be having a few more people join as we get started, but I wanted to welcome everybody to today's School Bus Council call. I am Brad Tucker here at ABA, and I'm joined by my colleague, Shay McConnell. And at this time, I'd like for everyone to mute your phones. You can press *6 to turn mute on or off. Later on, you'll have the opportunity to ask questions and during the question and answer period. Please note that this call will be recorded and shared with the group. I do have a few announcements before we get started. The School Bus Council will be holding a meeting at ABA's Marketplace on Monday, January 28th from 3 to 5 p.m. Again, that's January 28th from 3 to 5 p.m. There we're going to discuss a bit more on the call later about this meeting, but I wanted to let you know that the meeting will have 2 sessions. We will talk about ride sharing, such as Uber and Lyft, and its effect on student transportation. We will also discuss grant opportunities from the school bus for school bus operators. And again, this meeting will be Monday, January 28th, from 3 to 5 p.m. at ABA's Marketplace. And we'll be updating the agenda on that. You can go to our website at buses.org/SBC, as in School Bus Council. I also wanted to share another opportunity to promote the School Bus Council. We'll be filming a video at ABA's Marketplace, and it's going to be a friendly conversation to talk about what councils you belong to, why you belong to these councils, and what is the biggest value to belonging to these councils that you can't get anywhere else. And if you're interested in being in this video, you can let me know. My name is Brad Tucker. You can email me at B as in boy, Tucker@buses.org. Again, that's btucker@buses.org. Or you can call me at 202-218-7206. And now it's my pleasure to turn today's call over to ABA's school bus consultant, Rana Weber. Rana, please go ahead.
Thanks, Brad. Let me kick off with the items on the agenda, and then I have a few things to add that have come up since we put the agenda together. But the first is the UCR issue. This is the Unified Carrier Registration issue. This is a big deal and a big change that occurred in 2017, and we've worked with other partners to overturn this to your benefit. So I'm going to walk through it, but feel free to stop me if you have questions because it's a little complicated. So in 2017, the Unified Carrier Registration Board of Directors decided that the registration and fee requirements applied to for-hire carriers would be based on the entirety of their fleet, rather than only the buses providing interstate service, those buses crossing state lines, as defined by the FMCSA form MCS 150. So there was a discrepancy in the amount of buses you filed on your MCS 150 and the amount of buses you were charged fees for and other registration requirements for based in UCR. There was a meeting in mid-December at the UCR, and ABA joined with the National School Transportation Association and many local, state, regional motor coach and school bus associations and organizations. And we were successful in overturning this, and basically it was through an education effort driven by the National School Transportation Association. And what they agreed to was that didn't make a lot of sense. They reversed this, and it now matches what is on your MCS 150 form. One of the key reasons that this was helped to pull this around was that NISTA had done an informal survey over the years and discovered that on average, contractors used about 5% of their buses in intrastate service. So interstate service, excuse me. So it really helped to educate the board of directors of UCR that no, most contractors do not use their entire fleet to cross state lines. There have been anecdotal comments that contractors are receiving bills and notices of fines and of registration fees due back in 2016 and 2017. UCR said that the board said that those books should be closed and you should not be receiving any bills, fines, anything back from prior years. They could not affect 2018 because we were in the middle of that calendar year. So this switch starts with 2019. And it's expected that the board will send some clarifying communications to the states. But if you're continuing to have issues with this or anything else is coming up that doesn't seem quite right, please let us know. Reach out to Brad and we can connect you into the right people to prevent that from happening. They won't refund if you paid in 2018, but this will affect what you would be charged in 2019 and going forward. Any questions? Anybody have any communications you've received from them since then? Anybody getting any? And feel free to reach out offline if you want to talk about something that you're getting personally. But again, great overturn of a problem, and it should save you a lot of money going forward. Okay.
Yeah, if you want to unmute yourself, you can push *6 again.
Okay, I'll move forward. Hair testing and opioids.
Hi, Rana.
Yeah.
I have Susan Rohde here from ABA's Government Affairs, and she had something she wanted to add to that.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to mention, I know that this was with regard to the intrastate and this is school bus focused. However, since we are talking about UCR fees, just to note that FMCSA did finalize their ANPRM because they need to do this through rulemaking now for the annual fees as of December 28th. So in general, for UCR filings, that registration is now open, both at state sites and at the UCR site, because they were finalized as of December 28th. So, and enforcement will begin in general for UCR fees April 1st.
Great, thank you.
This is Don from DATCO. We have a sort of related problem, I guess not problem, but change. The states surrounding Connecticut, specifically Massachusetts now, is requiring trip permits for school groups that are in a school bus that are entering Massachusetts on buses without apportioned plates. So if we, previously, if it was a school group, we did not take out a trip permit, and certainly we don't have apportioned plates on our school buses. But now they're saying that any bus or any group that's crossing the state line into Massachusetts has to either have an apportioned plate or a trip permit.
I'm happy to look into this and see what I can find for you. Suzanne, do you happen to know anything off the top of your head that might shed some light on that?
No, Don, I'm sorry. Is this something that you've mentioned before to us?
No, this is fairly recent,
Okay.
and we don't have a lot of groups that take a school bus, that far.
Right.
We do have some, so we just been getting getting the permits. But I'd imagine in some states, or certainly some contractors that are right on the border, if other states are doing this now, are going to start enforcing. I mean, the way we found out about it is, we sent a school group up to Six Flags, which is an amusement park, and we got a $300 ticket. And we started looking into it after we got the ticket, and they said, oh, no, you have to have trip permits. So,
okay. Let me circle back to you then, and we maybe can find a little bit.
This is Brandon. I can answer that. Granted, we have not really focused on school buses before, and so the International Registration Plan, IRP, they did actually make a change about 3.5 years ago, and added that chartered school buses should have apportioned plates. Well, I guess we can put together something to get out to everyone on that.
Yeah, we probably should put out some kind of notice, because I don't know anyone that has a apportion plate on a school bus. And I don't even know if we can get an apportion plate on a school bus, because in Connecticut you have to have a school bus plate to run the bus as a school bus. So you'd have to probably dual plate it. We've just been buying the permits. It's just easier.
We'll follow up, Don. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Anybody else have any questions or concerns? Okay, moving into hair testing and opioids. President Trump signed legislation in late October aimed at tracking opioid abuse. As part of that bill, there's a provision for directing the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration to report to Congress on issuing guidelines for hair testing. The Secretary of Health and Human Services must also report to the House and Senate Transportation Committees on the guidelines and the status of those. This is something that the American Trucking Associations have been advocating for quite some time. It gives another opportunity for drug testing, and in the view of at least the American Trucking Association and others, it gives you a better window of when, in fact, longer window of drug usage. There's some controversy surrounding this method, and there are obviously additional costs associated with this method. Nothing is required at this time, but they are looking to get some guidelines out and at least have it as an option. But I just wanted you to know that it's out there on the horizon and continues to kind of move forward slowly. The Florida Autonomous School Bus, this was in the news a couple of months ago, but again, just kind of wanted you to be aware of it given the growth and proliferation of the autonomous industry. Transdev North America was operating a driverless school bus shuttle in Southwest Florida. This is something that they had been through the process with the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, and they had been given permission to import their shuttle vehicle for testing and demonstration purposes only. But the company was actually operating it as a pilot, and so NHTSA shut them down, calling it an unlawful and in violation of the company's temporary importation authorization. So not operating anymore, but had kind of been moving along. It was in a small community and pretty controlled. They were running it about 1 day a week. And there was an aide on the bus. Illegal school bus passing, there's been an increase of that, although thankfully it seems to have slowed down a little bit. And several states are focusing their campaign on increasing awareness. There were several incidents in late October, early November in Indiana, Mississippi, Florida, Pennsylvania. And in response, NHTSA issued, that's the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, it's a reminder urging motorists, caregivers, and parents to be alert, drive safely, and remember the rules on school bus safety. Just a reminder, and I did hear Charlie Hood on the call, who's with NASDIP. NASDIP, the National Association for State Directors of Pupil Transportation Services, does an annual survey of this every year. Their 2018 survey, more than 80,000 motorists passed stop school buses in their one-day sampling and in the states that reported. This indicates, if you extrapolate out the data, that there are more than 15 million annual violations throughout the country in the 180-day school year. So obviously it's a continuing problem and one that has grave consequences. There are resources available for your community if you're looking for something to help educate. It's a great conversation at a PTA, PTO meeting, however your community handles those, especially in the elementary world. Schoolbusfacts.com has several great graphics that show you how best to handle a stopped school bus, regardless of laws specific to states. It kind of tries to encompass everything and give you a one-stop shop. And there are a variety of good graphics there. And in response to those incidents in Indiana, especially where there were 3 student fatalities and 1 student was injured as they were crossing the road to board the bus, Indiana State Senator Randy Head announced a bill as their session resumes this week to implement policies to increase school bus safety. Specifically, his bill would increase penalties. It would require drivers to unload buses as close to the right-hand curb as possible, and drivers would not be allowed to unload passengers, requiring them to cross a roadway unless no other options are available. And other states have looked at this right turn only and right side only, kids getting off the bus. And that obviously makes some routing difficulties and changes in areas. So just be mindful that those things are out there. Any questions? And I know Charlie's on the call if you have any questions about the NASDIP survey. Okay. School bus accidents, we have seen a little bit of an increase there too. And, is it really, or does it just feel like it, is always the big question. We know school transportation is the safest form of transportation available. It can always be safer, and educating your communities is a great way to help draw attention to that. But it's always an opportunity too to broaden the conversation and see what we're missing. The greatest effect on children's safety is to eradicate, or at least to lessen, that illegal passing of school buses. Moving along to the 2019 DERA grants, EPA has announced approximately $40 million is available for grants for retrofit for school buses and for motor coach engine replacement projects. Funding amounts vary by region and by project, and there is matching requirements. Those also vary by project. Contractors can apply through nonprofit entities such as American Bus Association. If you're interested, please reach out to Brad. We've gotten a little bit of interest on this, and obviously are happy to have any conversations if you're interested. The proposal that you will have to put together, and we'll work with you on this to get you through it, is pretty comprehensive. It requires several elements such as a project summary and approach, your location, benefits to the community, community engagement and partnerships, project sustainability, environmental results, programmatic capability and past performance, budget, fleet description. So you can see it's very detailed. It's best if you have one person in your organization who's the point person who can work with me and others at ABA to help pull all of the materials together that we will need to apply. EPA was scheduled to do webinars this week. Those did not happen due to the government shutdown, but I'm happy to walk you through the process and have a detailed conversation with you on a one-on-one if it's something your company is interested in, and sort of what the requirements are and what we would need to do. Applications are due by the end of the day on March 6th. And like I said, those take quite a while to come together. So the most time we have to put them together, the better. Any questions about DERA or anything else?
Could you say again who one would have to contact to discuss that?
You can contact Brad Tucker at btucker@buses.org.
Okay.
You can also call me. My phone number is 202-218-7206.
When will you be available?
Right after this call, about 8:30 to 5 o'clock each day.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Can we go back to the drug testing or
Yep.
that topic? So we had a situation, and I assume we're going to have more now with Massachusetts has legalized recreational marijuana, and Connecticut is about to do so, and I know there's other states that also have it. So we've got a situation now where drivers are technically doing legal things that on their off time, and then, potentially could come into work, and because of the federal law, would be found in violation. We've got a zero tolerance for use of any drug. So if you test positive, you're done. So we had a driver come to us, right after the holidays, voluntarily, wasn't due for a test, wasn't called up on a random, said, I was at a holiday party over the weekend. Someone gave me some cookies that had something in it, and I assume it was marijuana. I felt high after I had the cookies. I didn't know they were in there. I didn't do it intentionally. What do I do? We didn't have him tested. He wasn't reporting for work. And so, we contacted our attorney, and what we decided to do was allow him to take a leave of absence for 30 days so that, he could clear whatever out of his system and then, not be subject to the possibility of a random test and then come back to work. But, I think we're going to need some advice on what to do when this comes up in the future, because, it's maybe not going to be a driver who comes to us voluntarily. It's going to be someone who is, either about to take a random test or just took a random test, and, it's going to be, there's going to be lawsuits, I'm sure, and I don't want to be the one that's the subject of one.
I know this has been a big struggle in the industry, and I'm curious, ABA, if Brandon and or Suzanne are still with us, what you guys have encountered on the motor coach side. Brad?
Hey, is Brandon still there? Yeah, they may have dropped off the call, unfortunately.
Yeah, let me look into this a little bit more, because I'm curious what they're hearing and seeing and doing on the motor coach side. I know this is a big issue, especially with the western states that have already gone down that road sooner than
Yep.
Massachusetts and California and Connecticut, excuse me. So I don't want to get out ahead of what's already out there. So let me check into it
Right.
and circle back.
I just think we need to come out with advice for people to say,
Yeah.
if this occurs, here's what you should do. Or I mean, we kind of looked at each other like, all right, what do we do now? I mean,
It's not the first time I've heard the question, and I think you're very much on target with kind of some guidance on what do you do in this situation. And I think it's a great step to be proactive, because you're right, it's going to happen whether someone willingly did it because they can or, didn't. So
exactly. Exactly.
I'm sorry, tell me who you are.
It's Don from Babco.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure. That was you.
Hi, Don. This is Brandon. Sorry, I missed half of your first part of your question, but I've been filled in. Related to marijuana use among drivers, that the DOT rules have not changed, so there's currently still is a zero tolerance for marijuana use, even if your state has legalized it. Now, if it's an intrastate driver,
that I understand, but here in the situation I gave, the driver technically didn't violate any rules, because the driver was not subject to a random, came to us and told us that he had ingested this stuff, and he claims he didn't know he did, but I mean, I assume because he came to us, he really didn't know, and said, I don't want to report to work because I know this is in my system. So he didn't violate the law. He didn't drive a bus under the influence. He didn't fail a test. And I guess I could have said, okay, I'm going to give you a reasonable suspicion because you told me you just did it.
right?
I guess, but that would be really kind of a awful move on my part, right?
Because he's going to fail.
Actually, I don't even know if that's enough for reasonable suspicion, because you'd have to observe his behavior.
Don, was he on the payroll? Don, was he on the payroll at that time?
He was not working, because it happened over the weekend, and he came to us before he reported to work. So
I don't know if this is Michelle from National Interstate. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Jill Nagy. She's an attorney in Pennsylvania that is doing a lot of work with operators when situations like this come up. I know that she has presented at different industry conferences, but that might be somebody to talk to see what they're seeing, because she works in multiple states, and I'm sure this has come up and it's not going to stop coming up.
Right. I mean, in the situation, our situation, it happened that he hadn't really violated anything, but I know it's going to come up when somebody does. You know, and then we're going to have to fire them, I guess. You know, it's just.
Brandon, are you all doing anything on the motor coach side in terms of advice or guidance, anything like that? Is there anything you can sort of piggyback onto to just sort of broaden for school bus, or is it just an untapped thing that we need to focus on?
Well, I mean, with all questions, it's kind of, you know, as they kind of tend to come up, we do have a mechanism for that here. And I know that Don is aware, because we have Pam Martinez getting ready to become the next chair of the BIS, the Bus Industry Safety Council, and we do take these questions like this from time to time. But I think what he's describing does kind of fall into that kind of interesting wedge in between the regulations, you know, best practice, and, you know, what's right. And I think
right, exactly.
I think it's an interesting thing to pose to a larger group and see what we come up with. So I definitely will commit to that and see what we come back with from others at large. But on this issue specifically, I mean, our party line has been, which Don said he's very well aware of, that, you know, the current DOT rules do not permit the use of marijuana by those who are driving commercial motor vehicles.
Yep. I mean, do you think there'll be an effort to change that? I mean, I don't know.
I mean, I know that obviously, Don, that, you know, there is a pretty annual review of the different, you know, prohibited substances, and there has been some movement to change some of the, you know, cold medications and things like that, and then sleeping aids and things like that being on the list. I know that marijuana is one that has been discussed, and there has even been discussed at the medical review board meetings, which is not necessarily directly related to this, but, you know, tangentially related to this. So I think it's going to be a few more years before there really gets momentum. You know, when 100% of the states were to have it be legal, then I think that would be revisited. But I think as long as it's illegal in some of the states, it will probably still be on the list of prohibited substances.
Right.
But like I said, I think we should definitely talk about it collectively, because there are a number of operators who do interstate-only operations, and I think in those contexts, your question becomes really, you know, almost an everyday business question.
Right.
Absolutely, yeah. And the Western states, having already moved forward on this, you know, I'm curious where they are on it and what best practices or what, you know, what they're utilizing to try to work through this. It's a good question. Anybody else on this topic before we move on to VW? Okay. VW, this is just something you should be aware of. We've talked about it. Go ahead. We've talked about it in several of our SBC meetings in the last year, but really just it's something you have to pay attention to in your state. In June of 2016, the Department of Justice reached a settlement with Volkswagen after discovering defeat devices in Volkswagen vehicles. Those devices resulted in better real-world fuel mileage and driving performance, but also the release of thousands of tons of NOx emissions in excess of regulated limits. So Volkswagen is paying the price for it. States are allocated amounts based on the amount of vehicles sold in those states. And there was a trust established for this in October of 2016, and then states established their beneficiaries and developed their RFPs for projects. All of the funding requests have to be made within 10 years, and all funds must be spent within 15 years. It's really a process for you to figure out what's going on in your state. Some states are further along than others, and there may be opportunities. Some states are giving quite a bit of money to school buses and school bus replacement. Some aren't. You should be eligible as a contractor. States had the option to change that and make it only to public districts. So it really is just something you need to figure out in your state, how much money is available, what entity is in charge, what the process is, and is there still an opportunity for you to apply for funds. If you have any questions with that, we're happy to help you on a state, specific basis or anything else. Or if you've got any general questions, happy to tackle those too. Okay. EPA, you should just be aware that in November they announced plans to place more stringent restrictions on heavy-duty trucks. A specific proposal is not likely until 2020, but EPA is beginning the formal rulemaking process, once the government reopens, for what it's calling its Cleaner Trucks Initiative. And it could affect vehicles as soon as model year 2024. And obviously that's a long ways out. And the rulemaking process is generally much slower than is expected when you start these out. So just something to keep an eye on. And then the last thing on the agenda, and I've got a few things to touch on from that, is Pennsylvania has a skills testing change you should just be aware of, effective immediately. A school bus designed to transport 11 to 15 passengers, including the driver, cannot be used in the state of Pennsylvania for a commercial skills test. A commercial skills test administered will not, in a 11 to 15 passenger school bus, will not be considered a valid test, nor will the applicant be licensed as a Class C commercial driver. So you have to use a bus with at least 16 passengers. A few other things, just so you're aware, New Jersey, following the tragic accident in Paramus, the governor signed legislation associated with school bus safety in December, requiring school bus operators to comply with all federal regulations on safety, noise, insurance, drug testing, and other areas. Requires all permanent and substitute school bus drivers and aides to undergo safety education programs twice a year. Requires holders of CDLs with school bus endorsement to submit a medical report by a certified medical examiner, and requires drivers over the age of 70 to submit proof of physical fitness every year, and those over 75 to submit proof every 6 months. And then also requires that the Department of Education notifies the board or school bus contractor that a bus driver has had their CDL suspended or revoked, and that the Board of Education or the contractor must verify to DOE that the driver in question no longer operates a bus. So some administrative burdens there in New Jersey based on the findings from the accident, the causes of the accident, all make sense, but something that other states can look to too if they choose to enhance their requirements. Driver shortages, there's reports across the country of shortages. I'm sure that's no surprise to any of you, and media reports of buses running late or condensed routes despite signing bonuses and other incentives. Areas across the country, it obviously varies in employment and other things. If a factory closes, for example, or opens, or a new store comes to town, that changes your employment in your area. But there are a lot of reports about it across the country. I'm sure it's no surprise, and I'm sure it's a hot topic in your community as well. And then just two other quick things. The Federal Commission on School Bus Safety issued its report in December. This recommends school systems consider arming personnel and advised against increasing the minimum age for gun purchases. The report was sent to the Department of Justice and Department of Education. And then the last thing is that NTSB, the National Transportation Safety Board, typically at this time of year does its most wanted list, and this is its most wanted safety improvements and changes. There are very typically school bus associated issues on their list. That was scheduled to be this week. It was moved to February 4th at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. We will obviously keep an eye on this and report out to you if there's anything on there. Things that have been on there in the past have been cameras inside the vehicle, some of the things that NTSB advocates for following accidents in their reports. So just food for thought. That's a non-binding. You're not required to do anything. It's just what they would hopefully like to see. As Brad mentioned, the School Bus Safety Council will be meeting in Louisville on Monday, the 28th, from 3 to 5. We hope you'll join us. Among other things, we're going to talk about ride sharing and the growth of that in communities, and how that it works against and with school transportation services. The DEER grant in particular, and what you can do to apply or how we can help you with that. And also, we're going to have a conversation on seatbelts and how that market is changing, including retrofits. And we'll have some the seatbelt representatives and the companies Syntax Seating and HSM, among others, on hand to talk about your specific questions, especially as it relates to retrofits, as that has really changed and is taking over in the last year or so. And then we'll hit other issues that are going on in the news. Any questions? Okay. If you are interested in DEER grants, or if you have any other questions you want to talk about offline, you can reach Brad at btucker@buses.org, and he can get in touch with me, or we can help work through whatever you need. Brad, I'll turn it back to you.
Great. Thank you, Rhonda. Thank you for leading the call, and I also want to thank everybody for their participation. Again, the School Bus Council meeting at Marketplace will be January 28th from 3 to 5. And if you have any other questions about today's call or the School Bus Council, reach out to me. Again, my email address is b as in boy, tucker@buses.org. That's btucker@buses.org. Or call me at 202-218-7206. We also have a website. That's buses.org/SBC. And that's buses.org/SBC. And with that, thank you all again, and we will see you at Marketplace. Have a great day.